Welcome back. You're still watching Daybreak, and it's now 12 minutes past 7 o'clock, and we are talking about the first reading of the BBI report. It is to be officially unveiled later this morning at the Bomas of Kenya. We'll be crossing over there to speak to our team of reporters. But before we do that, we have Commissioner Waiganjo, former Commissioner of the CIC. We have Commissioner Thomas Letangule, former Commissioner at IBC, and Commissioner Priscilla Nyokabi at the National Gender Inequality Commission. And Kamotho Waiganjo, so we're talking about the gender rule and the changes that are being proposed by the BBI report, and you are reflecting on the fact that the members of the National Assembly will be capped at 360, scrapping the woman representative seats, but then throwing the responsibility of ensuring gender compliance to the political parties and IEBC. Don't you think this is a raw deal for the women who are unfortunately disadvantaged at the moment politically?
It's definitely it's an improvement from where we are today, because don't forget that part of the reason why even the Chief Justice gave the advisory for dissolution of Parliament was because we don't have a constitutional statutory mechanism to reach the not more than two-thirds. So in a sense, this opens the possibility of us being able to reach the two-thirds. Of course, the risk there is that also requires a significant number of women to be elected in the geographical seats. So that's going to be something that we need to watch. But I think ultimately, Kenyans must internalize the need to ensure that we have fair gender representation in the elective positions, in the pure elective, geographically elected positions. And the Constitution has placed that burden on the political parties. One hopes that political parties then will do what we had proposed in the CIC, which is to ensure that in every county, including those where they are strong, they have not less than not more than two-thirds nominees, so that you ensure that in their strongholds you have a significant number of women winning elected seats. But I think that the other problem I had is a level of hesitation on that gender question in the BBI document. And the hesitation is at two levels. If you look at the language used on the gender mix at the gubernatorial seats, it says that a candidate shall consider, the other gender. It does not require them. One hopes that we will strengthen that language, because I do not know any country in this Kenya where you cannot find one capable deputy or governor candidate. I think it's unfortunate that that language has been used, and I don't understand why. It's either we remove it completely or we say it affirmatively if we really believe in the need to have gender equity. And finally, this country is going to be led at the very top tier by a sort of pentagon. The president, the deputy president, the deputy prime minister, and the two DPM. It's unfortunate that again the language of gender is totally absent. And I think even in terms of principle, I think it would have been good for that language to be there. Then it says that we truly do take the question of gender seriously, and especially some of those positions are pure appointees, like the deputy prime ministers. We don't even require an election; they just need to have been ministers. So be ministers. So I think one hopes that if we're going to be revising the document in terms of the gender question, those are the areas that we'll be looking at.
And Commissioner, so now he raises an interesting point about the requirement that for every governor's candidate, the running mate, you need to consider them. And I was looking at that and wondering, is it a requirement or is it based on preference? You should at least consider, well, you can tell us what that is, but also looking at, there appears to be a sunset clause in how county assemblies are going to be having those top-up seats for the disadvantaged gender. It's talking about after 2 general elections, then those will lapse. What informs this thinking?
Let me start with the last one, because affirmative action generally has a timeline, because affirmative action is supposed to pull the people who are behind up to the level of equality with the other people. So that's not new for us. And because the Constitution is a 2010 Constitution, a lot of affirmative action programs are 20 years. So you're assuming that we've already done 10 years, so in the next 10 years. And just so that the people who are being helped can also pull up. You are nominated once, in the next election you contest for an elective seat. And that's what should happen also for the MCAs. And then with the party strengthening, in fact, the biggest hope of the gender rule is also the party strengthening. And remember, even in the MCA, MCAs, you are still required to do your 2/3 party candidates list. So again, if a county like Nyeri, where I come from, we have 30 wards, it means that if the party is fronting candidates, at least 10 must then be of the other gender in the elective position. And you know that's a stronghold area, so there's a chance that, you know, quite a number will be elected. So that's why it's in the next 2 elections. But there is nothing wrong, you know, always with affirmative action, you have a timeline. So there's nothing new about sunset clauses. You see the equalization fund, it had a sunset clause. There's just, you know, sort of a concept around that. And even we as women would want to now, you know, you rush a little bit more so that you cover the gap a little faster. On the first question around the sort of other gender issues and what we need to do. And which one?
I'm talking about the governors and the deputy.
Yes, the governors and deputy governors.
That
also for us is one of the gains that we are counting, in the sense that you not only have the senators at the Senate voting for the money, you also now have implementers at the ground on the gender question. And for us, for example, women economic empowerment, if you vote for women economic empowerment in the Senate, you now have a governor or deputy governor to then implement the matters on the ground. On the question of language, you know what happens with constitution making, and I know the two lawyer colleagues know that it's a negotiated process, and you have many people on the table, and so you have people in different spectrums and extremes. You have those that didn't want the clause to get in at all, and you have those that were supporting the clause. But what happens is that you get the clause in, and let us now have the conversation when the clause is in. So the language of shall consider is actually that sort of line, that this is a negotiated process. We need to convince each other. We need to have this conversation on the table. And the gender concerns, the 2/3 concern, is one of the main reasons why the BBI, or one of the questions that the BBI should address and leave addressed in a final and firm way. So that is why that one is also on the table.
If this is approved and becomes law, becomes part of the constitution, and you have a female candidate, let's assume Priscilla Nyokabi is running for governorship in Nyeri County, and they pick a female deputy, would that be unconstitutional?
It would be unconstitutional in the sense that I did not consider a member of the opposite gender.
You might have considered and decided that you're working with a woman.
What happens with law is, I don't know how much a constitution really asks you to consider it. Forget the language, you know. There is a reason. So it's just that you don't want to get the clause dead at this point. You want the clause in, and we can improve. And you know, for people like me who've been in women rights for a while, that has been our strategy. Unaingiza kichwa, it's a camel story. You get your head in, and then the back will follow, you know, once you make a bit of more ground. Right. So we are happy about it. And what also would happen with the women is that at the county level, you are then offering yourself to be considered. We are not sleeping. We are fronting ourselves to be considered. And in every county, as Commissioner Kamoto says, there will be women who can be considered for the role of either governor or deputy governor. Remember, in the candidates list of governor, every party will have to give a list of 16 gubernatorial candidates who will also have considered the opposite gender, and we will show the way.
These are they're very sweet to the mouth sort of proposals, if I may call them so. But how do you ensure that in Nyeri County, where you come from, that you have 30 MCAs, and ensure that 10 of them, if you are to remain in Jubilee Party, have to be women, yet you're also encouraging the universal suffrage?
Well, it's a national conversation. The gender question is a national conversation. And so, because what happens is, at some point in time, and that's where we are hoping our country will get to, it will be the quality of leadership. Men and women will be leaders of our country, and gender will not be a question. What we'll be looking for is the best candidate. And COVID has shown us a good example of women prime ministers. The prime minister of, they've done a really good job in New Zealand and Germany as well, Angela Merkel. Angela now, people don't quite think she's a woman. She's the chancellor of Germany. So we are also hoping that as time goes, the MCA, and you see the ward fund is 5%. As we want to spend our ward fund better, and it's quite a lot of money. It's over 500 million per county for the ward fund. So as we are coming to spend money, we women are saying we are even better managers of money. If you had 1,000, if me and Letangule have 1,000 shillings each, leave your 1,000 with me. It will be much safer. So that's what we are hoping to do in the electoral process, and convince Kenyan people to elect women.
I don't know the Commissioner Letangule agrees.
Priscilla has a lot of faith in the Kenyan people. I think my only concern with it is that hesitation. And I understand where Priscilla is coming from. That in terms, because it's a contested issue, maybe you don't want to be mandatory in the beginning and you want to send that message. But I think the issue will be that when this issue is argued after the elections, people will be saying, look, if the Constitution had intended to require it, it would have said it. If it just requires you to consider, all I need to show is I'll consider. And actually, I can even do interviews. candidates, and then say I didn't find anyone fitting. So I think that's something we need to warn ourselves, but at least it's an improvement from where we are, which is a good thing. Okay,
I want us to make progress and focus on one of the contentious issues in the proposed bill, and that is to do the IEBC. Already the chairman of the IEBC, Kati, has written a press statement saying that whatever is being proposed by the BBI appears to be intended at weakening how IEBC works. But what we know is that currently the commissioners that are serving at the moment will have to be vetted afresh if this becomes law. The tenure of commissioners will be reduced from 6 years to 4 years. The commissioners have been capped at 7. It's one of the few commissions whose membership is capped in the constitution. The political parties, if this becomes law, the political parties will have to pick 4 commissioners out of the 7. And also the other things that IEBC will have to do is that the chief executive officer, his tenure or her tenure will be reduced to 3 years from the current 5 years renewable ones. The returning officers will serve on part-time basis, and of course the rest of the proposals are on the screen. But Commissioner Letangule, you worked at the IEBC, yes, the inaugural IEBC, if I may call it so. So what do you think, that some of the commissioners will be representing political parties, that you have to cap the tenure at 4 years? What are your initial thoughts?
Well, capping to 4 years, I think they are trying to address the issue of commissioners conducting only one election at any given time. The 6-year period was to ensure continuity in the sense that you conduct 2 elections. For example, in my team, we conducted the 2013 election, and if we had remained to the end, we would have conducted the 2017 election. I think it's still something workable if we ensure that commissioners conduct only one election and leave. But then that will leave a gap, because you know, to be trained as an election commissioner, it takes time. It takes time for you to really understand election law and this election cycle. And so it will be a loss to the country that you have someone who has stayed in the elections for 4 years and leaving again after 4 years. And so that memory and that experience will be lost. And every time we'll have new people. But that's something for Kenyans to decide. As to electing commissioners from the political parties, I've seen that 4 commissioners will come from the political parties. The majority party, 2 commissioners, and 2 more from the minority party. And is it 3 other commissioners to be recruited competitively? I have always argued that having commissioners from political parties will be an issue for strife. And you will see that if this thing is adapted the way it is, you will see that in another 4 years we'll be changing this law. The reason is you have bipartisan commissioners from political parties, parties that are going to contest in that very election. They are going to represent interests of their political party. What will those people do? They will be taking sides. They will be campaigning almost for the winning of their parties within the commission. And we've seen experience elsewhere. In Zanzibar, the commissioners actually quarreled and did not agree on the election result. The end result is that there was a lot of disarray in the elections conducted there in Zanzibar, just here across our borders. And so that it's certainly going to happen if we are going to have commissioners from political parties. Remember, in the 2007 was it in 2007 election, where we had commissioners appointed by President Kibaki from political parties, there was still a problem. And that's why we formed the Kriegler Commission to look into why there was credibility issues about that election. And the recommendations of the Kriegler report were that let us recruit commissioners competitively. I hope then that we will listen to that report as we go to Bomas. We'll look at that and say, let us not go this way, so that we have commissioners who are completely, or seem, you know, the question is perception. At least commissioners perceive not to be leaning to certain political parties. If then you have commissioners from, for example, ODM, it means they will be sitting in the commission the whole day. At night, they will be reporting to their masters and telling them what is going on in the commission. And so I think it will create a lot of strife within the commission. Honestly, this is an area, and I'm talking as an expert knowing about these elections, that we need to relook into.
Right, and Commissioner Weganjo, if what is proposed by BBI was law today, then Wafula Chebukati and his team would be planning to exit come January 2021. And as he says about experience and, of course, having to understand the law and how things work, don't you think this tenure issue is going to affect the credibility of elections, bearing in mind that you're also saying that a chief executive has a 3-year tenure, which is only renewable once, returning officers can only manage one general election, the IBC staff in the secretariat can only serve for a maximum of 6 years? Why are we doing all this?
I think one of the problems in Kenya is that we have tried to resolve our lack of faith in the electoral system through law, while what we have is a political problem. And I'm glad that the Constitution is partially resolving that. And we have made it sound like the problem with our elections is the IBC. I think IBC is only a part player in our electoral problems. I understand where the BBI is coming from in terms of saying the commissioner should only serve for 4 years. If the bulk of them are representatives of political parties, the political dynamics change after an election. So you don't want the people who had been appointed by the political parties in the previous election cycle to be the one overseeing the next election. Of course, there's going to be challenges about the responsibility and all that. But I think the proposal to shift the players in the election management body to political actors is a very dangerous one. It's I can see the thinking behind it. The thinking behind it is that if you have these people accepting an election, that election is accepted politically. But the problem is that if we have strife within the commission that is clearly defined through political boundaries, that can actually lead to a very, very messy situation where some of the commissioners refuse to accept an election result because they have to go and respond to the persons who appointed them. So that's something we need to think carefully. I think we're resolving a problem that is not a problem of IEBC. My own view is that if we resolved the issue of the winner take all, if we receive the incentive for the losing candidate to be able to join government, as leader of the official opposition, if we expanded the top and the executive, if we gave more money to devolution, those issues will go further in ensuring that we have the sort of climate that can accept an election result than changing the secretariat and saying people must go home after 6 years. We're assuming that these people are untrustworthy, can't be depended on, even the typical bureaucrats in the election management body. I'm not sure that was the best way we could have handled it, even though one understands the political reasons for why that is being done. But I think it needs a rethink. And one of the things we need to keep asking, we will still then have what you call an independent electoral commission. If the reality is that even though people are called independent, they end up not being independent, how do we clean up that process so that, yes, the political parties are involved, but people don't go there as representatives of political parties? That really is something that can be very, very dangerous for the process. I think it's something that needs a little more thinking, even if one understands the justification for it.
Right, and joining us this morning, I'll get to you, Commissioner Nyokabi, but joining us this morning is Steve Ogola, who is an advocate of the High Court. Well, it's a panel of lawyers today. I'm starting to feel like learned. Steve, so now, IEBC, the I is for a reason, Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission, but now it appears with the proposals, we might be blurring it. What, in your view, from what you've observed in the elections you've been looking at, what do you think would be the best way to handle this proposal, which is in the BBI?
I think there is a twin problem with the BBI proposal on the reform of the IBC Commission. The first problem relates to the alteration of the constitutional architecture on composition. The Constitution requires a neutral expert approach to election management. That is why it's called the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. If there is a problem with independence of some commissioners, then you deal with that problem without altering or interfering with the architecture or the design of the Constitution. Because the entire Constitution is organized around the philosophy of independence. All commissions must remain independent. So when you talk about injecting politics into the IBC, you're not only introducing the problem of management of perception, around the commission, you're also altering the very design that the Constitution hoped to achieve. The second problem with the reform proposal in the BBI relates to the removal procedure. The purported or the so-called vetting is actually a removal procedure that contradicts what is already documented in Article 251 of the Constitution. If you look at Article 251 of the Constitution already provides a predictable pathway for removal or for vetting.
Right.
Because if you have a complaint against a commissioner, then you present it to Parliament. Parliament will examine it for merit and then advise the President to establish a tribunal. The tribunal will examine the complaint further. The process of examining that complaint, Sam, is actually a vetting process. So that if it is not found to be merited, the complaint is dismissed. But if it is found to be merited, then the tribunal will recommend the removal of a commissioner, whether that commissioner is the IBC commissioner or any other commissioner. What is the legal justification for vetting someone who is already vetted and is in office and has enjoyed security of tenure? Because if you are saying that you can vet for purposes of continuity, you're also saying that you can vet and then remove if you find them to be unsuitable. There is going to be a serious constitutional and legal challenges with the proposal to vet these commissioners. And again, more importantly, Sam,
right.
The election management is about perception. If you allow the players to control the perception of the commission, then you will have a commission that is either good or bad based on the attitude or the position or the feelings of the players. I think what we need to do to boost perception problems at the commission is to have a direct conversation with the people or the voters and ask ourselves honest questions. The very difficult questions that politicians can't pose. Has there been a direct indictment of any commissioner in relation to the management of the last election? The presidential election was nullified, yes. But was there a direct indictment of any individual commissioner? Is there a live complaint against any commissioner in relation to election management? No. What we have are a section of the political players who believe that IBC did a bad job and now they want them out. The Constitution does not operate based on passion and discretion. The Constitution operates based on known norms and standards. Let anybody who has an issue with the existing commissioners present them to Parliament. Let Parliament consider those merits, those complaints.
Right.
Then a tribunal will be formed, and so on and so forth. But those are the twin problems I see with the conversation around reforming the IBC.
All right, Ogola, and we'll get back to that. But Commissioner Nyokabi, so now, one Kamotho Waiganjo says that we're trying to cure a political problem through the law. And of course, Wafula Chebukati, the chairperson of IBC, released a statement last week indicating that since 1992, there has been allegations against the electoral body of the time. I mean, how do you make a case for vetting Chebukati and his team of 2 commissioners afresh? Yet they have the security of tenure. And you are saying that once they are vetted and they are found unsuitable to sit in that office, then they cease being commissioners. Is that fair application of law, and what proposals there may be in the BBI?
You know, this particular part, and one of the things that we need to remember is that this report comes in the heels of the November reports. And one of the things that has happened to the country is just reading only now the new report, but also not reading the policy, the administrative, the statutory issues that are all, you know, sort of part of this report. So that this particular question of IBC, the first report already identified trust issues as one of our biggest problems as a country. That is true, we have ethnic competition and the ethnic communities are not cohesive and we need to build a nation. But they found that one of the things about us as Kenyans is that we just don't trust. We don't trust the IBC at all. We don't trust it. Yeah. So now you have to deal with that lack of trust. And that lack of trust then means then you have to, you know, since we don't trust the commission at all, as we try to increase the trust, the political players are very, very important in the political environment. And, you know, the report says that we have ethnic, relations are not very strong. But during elections, what was, sort of just a simmering problem underneath now erupts. So what we need to deal with is the divisive elections. So if we're dealing with the divisive elections, the electoral management body is at the center of those divisive elections. And we have certain views about that body. And I can tell you, for somebody who's participated in elections and politics, the commissioner who gets sent to your region to oversee, you start to sweat. You know, if you have certain assumptions that we are Tanyangusha. When they are recruiting the returning officers and the electoral clerks and all of that, so what you see in terms of the bill is an attempt at that trust issue. But I think what we need to go back to is the trust question as Kenyans. So let's not just read IEBC alone. Let's also read the policy issues. Let's read the first report, and let's ask ourselves, what IEBC would we trust? So the political players were important, then they were given their space. Other Kenyans are important, they have their space. And that is why you see 7. And 7 is very deliberate, because in Kenya when you say 9, every province, wanaleta mmoja, wanaleta mmoja. And now we are not able to vet the guy of that province because we don't want our guy vetted. When they are 7, we don't have enough. So we must put the 7 names here. Even the 4 that you see from political parties, the parties are many. Like in the parliament now, parliamentary political parties are more than 10. So we don't even have enough for each political party. So now we must agree on 4 Kenyans. We, all of us as a political class, agree on 4 people. And then the rest of the professionals and everybody else, we have a process that gives us the 3.
How do you deal with the perception that you're going to, those political party elected or appointed commissioners are going to serve the interest of the political party?
What is happening is this. People are reading it wrongly. They are not direct reps. ODM is not sending a commissioner. Jubilee is not sending a commissioner. The entire political, all the parties in parliament, the parliamentary political parties, which is what happens even in other countries, are giving 4 names that they agree on. And there is a process of vetting and finding suitability and application process, so that what we are trying to do is increase the confidence that if you give us a list of 20 names, and we pick 4 as a selection panel, and I've served in selection panels. So these 4 are out of the ones that you gave us. So you surely have confidence on these 4. And you actually know, like even here, if we sit, there are Kenyans who we know do a good job. Like, just to give an example for somebody like Manu Chandaria, who's done a good job. We can all agree that Manu Chandaria is a good person and can serve the country well. So that the 4 are not direct. ODM is not directly nominating. But just see it as a question of a trust deficit, and what do we do with a country with huge levels of trust deficit, and what do we do in an electoral process where we don't trust the electoral management body. So that the answer was, instead of killing it after every election, let it die by law. Let it have a tenure, so that even when you serve as a commissioner, you don't keep looking out of the window whether the demonstrators are coming. You know, I have a 4-year term, you serve us for 4 years, and then you go and serve other areas. As a returning officer, you serve one election, you do your best in that election, and then because we don't trust, it's like a conveyor. Tuleta wengine, now wafanye hiyo kazi.
You don't think that would hurt the level of experience that you...
Can I say something?
Yes, Commissioner.
Yes, I was going to say, I think we need to recognize our political realities. If you talk about, because the language of the BBI talks about representatives of parliamentary political parties. Right now, the only persons who can send parliamentary political parties are the 2 major parties. That really is the reality. And whether in terms of perception, and in terms of reality, this is not just perception. Those people will go in to represent the interests of the political parties that appointed them. And that comes with its challenges. And what I have been asking is, why don't we strengthen the position of the political parties in the selection panel? Because then the negotiations that Nyokabi is talking about, which are it's important to have the politicians trust the electoral body. But their role is to sit in the selection panel that then agrees on the Manduchandarias, on the other Kenyans, as opposed to really sitting and saying these are the people who represent us in the commission. But you can sit as part of the election panel that can interview people. Those people go representatives, but not, as independent commissioners, but coming through that process. The process, by the way, to respond to Steve Ogola on the transitional provision, the truth of the matter is you cannot have an election where the entire political establishment has no faith in you. You can't. So these transitional provisions are recognizing that reality. That, if the entire political establishment have said they do not want you to be the one leading the body, whatever constitutional protections you have, the truth that those constitutional protection will be revised so that we can have, because the bigger issue is not the individual. The bigger issue is how do we ensure that we don't have these incessant fights that we have after every election. That if we can find a solution to that problem through some slight expansion of government, through the leader official position, through even transitional provisions that remove the current commissioners and appoint night ones, I think it's good for the country.
Okay, all right. So Commissioner Iganjo, of course, Commissioner Letangule left office in that manner. He left before his term was concluded, but he left a rich man. So we'll talk about that later
Not a rich man. Sam, can I have a...
No, just before you do, I'm looking at, what clause is this now? It's clause 8 of the BBI constitutional amendment proposal. And I'm looking at the proposal to amend Article 88, Clause 3A, to introduce 3A that says that the commission consists of 7 members, 4 of whom shall be representatives of parliamentary political parties. Commissioner Nyokabi, you said that they are not representing ODM or whatever, but the basic reading, we'll dive into that after the break. The basic reading is that they shall be representatives of parliamentary political parties that people may have to raise issues with on what happens to the eye on independence. We take a short break. When we return with more. Of course, we're still with Commissioner Iganjo, Commissioner Nyokabi, Commissioner Letangule, and one advocate, Steve Ogola. Commissioner Nyokabi tells me that she may have to leave. We'll see about that after the break.